Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this 1-hour session, Building Business Resilience Through Effectively Engaging Freelancers. It's a huge topic and it can't be covered in an hour, but this is part of a series of events from PiPA relating to parent and carer freelancers. So please keep an eye on your inbox as well as on social media. I'm aware that we've got quite a wide range of attendees here today, from charter and foundations partners right the way through to some new faces, including freelancers. So welcome. My name is Romana Bennett, and it's my privilege to be chairing today's session. I'm a British Asian woman in my early 50s with silver and dark shoulder-length hair, and today I'm wearing a cream blouse with red parrot markings all over it. I'm also wearing glasses. So by way of background, I'm a consultant employment lawyer with Saltworks Law. That's a community interest company, and I advise both employers and employees on employment law issues. I have 2 children now at secondary school. I also have aging parents. And since March, I've also been working with PiPA on an interim basis supporting the charter programme. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Anna Enold-Dynalov, co-founder and joint CEO of PiPA, and Lucy Perrins, our marketing and CRM manager. If you don't already follow us, you can find us at www.pipacampaign.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. And we're going to share any links with you in the chat box below and also by email afterwards. So before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you need closed captioning, then this will be available via the integrated Zoom button. So just click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. As this is a webinar, your microphones and your cameras have been turned off, but you can use the chat function to communicate with everyone, including the speakers. So please feel free to give that a go and to introduce yourselves and your organisation or your skill set if you're a freelancer. If you have any questions during the course of this session, please could you pop those into the Q&A box below. We've got a lot to cover today. We may not have time to answer these live, but please do put them in the box and we'll endeavour to come back to you. You can also email any questions later to programs@pipacampaign.com. If some reason, which is often the way with tech, Zoom doesn't work for you and the sound goes off or you get kicked out, you can also use the same email to get in touch. And someone on the PiPA team will do their best to help you and can also send you a new link. And finally, today's session will be recorded and we will share the recording with you later. So let's begin. Why are we holding this webinar? Well, freelancers make up a vast proportion of the performing arts. They're the glue of our industry, as a vast majority work in key roles either on stage, backstage, in admin and creative roles. That's not an exhaustive list. And yet, especially since COVID, we hear from performing arts organisations over and over again that they are struggling to attract and retain freelancers, as so many seem to have left the industry. Caring responsibilities intersect with every single other protected characteristic, and therefore they must be a key aspect or area for organisations to consider when they're looking at their inclusive practices and also access considerations. So some of the themes that we're going to explore during the course of today's webinar are, we're going to try and understand some of the barriers that prevent organisations from attracting freelance talent, especially parents and carers. We want to highlight some of the strategies and actions that some organisations are already taking to better engage with their freelance workforce. And we have Mark Heholt, Director of Policy and Strategic Funding at the Royal Opera House, and also Katherine Senior, who is the co-founder and producer of the touring company Tilted Wig Production. We also want to give you some practical tips that you can start to put in place to create this supportive infrastructure within your organisation to both attract and to retain freelance talent, and ways in which you can communicate this. And for you, and for those of you who don't know PiPA that well yet, we'd also like to tell you a little bit about PiPA and what PiPA does. So let's start with that. At PiPA, we believe that the performing arts, music, dance, theatre, opera, can only be truly exceptional and world-class if it's inclusive of and accessible to all talents and circumstances, including those of parents and carers. We also conduct research. We work in partnership with the performing arts industry, and we advocate for better policies and better working practices to ignite that change. And we do this by supporting performing arts organisations to implement best practice through inclusive policies and working practices and via our foundation and charter programs. This is key. It's not only to attract and retain parents and carers, it's also beneficial for any employee or freelancer who needs to manage work and life demands. Our well-established charter program, for example, will offer performing arts organisations a personalised but robust monitoring and evaluation framework to help review existing policies and practices, or if there aren't any, we'll help you create them. We can then identify areas for development and support the implementation of change. Our partners can also access this extensive toolkit on our website. We've got templates, we have case studies, we have sample policies. And the other thing our partners benefit from is that PiPA continuously shares learning from the wide network we have of performing arts organisations who are already working with us towards best practice. And so for more information on that, please do go to our website or get in touch. So challenges and barriers for freelancers with caring responsibilities. Well, we know freelance work can be precarious, unpredictable. It comes with irregular working patterns. You have last-minute engagement, changes to schedules, long hours, regular evening, weekend and bank holiday work, and frequent location changes. And you've also got intense prep, rehearsal, training times to keep up your skills. And on top of all that, with caring responsibilities, you have this challenge to find flex, to find out of hours, affordable and appropriate child or adult elder care. And this is highlighted in PiPA's research because another important part of what PiPA does is to investigate through evidence-based research this link between caring responsibilities and career progression in the performing arts. Anna, I'd like to hand over to you, please. Can you introduce yourself and also highlight some of the findings from PiPA's research that is relevant to today's session, and especially those barriers that parents and carers are facing?
Thank you, Romana. Yes, so I'm Anna Inoltena-Ilov. I am the co-CEO and creative director of PiPA. I'm a white woman in her 40s. I've got dark brown hair that is currently up. I'm wearing a green patterned shirt, a black jacket, and my purple glasses today. I will just quickly share my screen as well. Hopefully that goes smoothly. Right, ideally you can all see my screen now. Good. So like you said, Romana, freelancers make up the majority of the performing arts workforce, and our industry is dependent on this talent in every aspect. Yet it is also the most vulnerable part of our workforce, as the self-employed have fewer workplace protections than employees have. And we've all seen that during COVID, and we are still feeling the effects. And at PiPA, we hear from many performing arts organizations that they now struggle to secure freelance or casual staff in key positions, which is putting an even bigger pressure on those who are already in work, for example, in backstage roles. So our research has shown time and time again that parents and carers regularly turn down work. 76% said that they turn down work due to their caring responsibilities, but for freelancers, this is even higher, with 85% of freelancers turning down work because of their caring responsibilities. So parents and carers often self-select out because of last-minute calls, for example, that make it really tricky for parents and carers to respond, but mainly because they cannot see how to manage the assumed work structures or work demands with their caring-related needs. Freelancers often fear that disclosing that they have caring responsibilities will negatively affect their chances of finding or securing work in the future. Research has also shown that the median income for freelancers is £15,000 per year. And on average, parents and carers also earn less than those without caring responsibilities, which makes securing child or elder care even more tricky. And this is then in addition to having to find out of hours, holiday or weekend care that is required in our industry. In the big freelancer survey of Freelancers Make Theatre Work, financial uncertainty and low pay were listed as the most widely reported concerns across all career stages, regions, and sectors. So, faced with unsuitable working practices paired with financial instability, many freelancers feel that they cannot sustain their career in the arts, and they therefore have to change their roles, or they decide to leave the sector. Women, disabled parents and carers, and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are actually most affected. And as you said, caring responsibilities intersect with every other protected characteristics. So they are a key element of the whole inclusion, diversity, and equality agenda. We found that 43% of people who left the performing arts industry cited caring responsibilities as their main contributing factor. But during COVID, we also found that 72% of parents and carers were thinking to leave the performing arts industry. And unfortunately, these are the facts that we are now facing as an industry. So reviewing our work structures and offers will be key to returning freelancers into our sector. Back to you, Romana.
Thank you, Anna. So Anna, you mentioned that parents and carers are self-selecting out of work opportunities, but 40% of parents and carers actually would like to increase their working hours by an additional 2 days of work per week. So it means parents and carers want to work more, but it's the barriers that they're facing, prevents them from engaging with available opportunities. So we can begin to see some of the barriers. And if we can highlight the challenges, we can then address these and start to think of solutions. 30% said the biggest challenge to parenting and family commitments they faced was lack of flexible working as well as scheduling issues, but only 4% made reference to having a supportive employer. I think the good news is that you can do something about these as an organization. And so I think we should look at some strategies, and a really good place for us to start is communication. And that leads me very nicely on to our first speaker. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Mark Heholt, Director of Policy and Strategic Funding at the Royal Opera House, one of our current charter partners, who will be sharing the thoughts behind their freelance community charter, launched in June 2023 and also published on their website. And we've got a link to that document just in the chat box if you want to look at that later. Mark, could I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm very excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. As you said, Romana, I'm Mark Heholt. I work at the Royal Opera House. I'm Director of Policy and Strategic Funding. I'm a black guy with a bald head and glasses, and I'm a he/him, and I'm currently wearing a black shirt. And I feel as though I ought to be wearing something more exciting, but anyway, I'm not. So that's me. As I said, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about what is the Royal Opera House's freelance community charter, and how and why did it come about? How was it created?
Sure. So, the Royal Opera House, as many of you may know, uses or works with more freelancers than any other organisation in the sector outside the BBC. And we've known for a very long time, but almost in the back of our heads, I suppose, how absolutely critical freelancers are to us doing what we do. And that's right across the board. Everything we do. We're a large organisation. We have 1,000 employees. We put on a lot of shows, and of course, there's a lot of people who work here doing a lot of different things, from the technical and production and hair, wigs and makeup and all that kind of stuff. And we rely very, very heavily on freelancers. I think what brought it front of mind for us was the pandemic, where it became very apparent, I think, just in society at large, that the freelancers were rather left behind in terms of the amount of support that they got. There wasn't a furlough scheme and so on and so forth. And I think it's very clear, and freelancers themselves would be painfully aware, that actually government policies in terms of benefits and tax and other such things often don't really work for the freelance community. So this became very apparent to us, became very front of mind. And we decided that we really wanted to do something about it. we'd been involved in a lot of conversations with a lot of people over a long time. And to be perfectly frank, we became a little bit frustrated at the lack of movement. So we decided that we were going to try and do something, not because we thought that we had all of the answers, not that we thought that we would find the perfect solution, but we thought that the best way of starting was frankly to start. And the first thing that we thought we needed to do was certainly not me and other people like me sitting in a room drafting something, but rather to bring in right from the very beginning freelancers themselves. We wanted freelancers to shape what it was that we were trying to do, what was the scope, how would we go about it, what would be the processes, and so on. So right from the very beginning, we brought freelancers in. The very first thing we did was to have a sort of a round table. We had, I think, about 30 or 40 freelancers from all different sort of walks of life and different parts of the organization they worked in, who came to us. We paid them to do that, not a huge amount because budgets are always tight, but we felt it was important to pay them in recognition of the time that they were giving up. And the critical thing about that, I think, was, as I said from the very beginning, it helped to shape what it was we were trying to do and how we were going to try to do it. That doesn't mean, of course, that we were able to do straight away everything that we'd like to do. We said from the very beginning, and this is a bit of an elephant in the room, that pay was out of scope. And of course, pay is important, but pay was something that we didn't, or at least I didn't, have much control over. So we decided we wanted to focus on those things over which we did have some control so that we could make some early progress and really make some steps in the right direction, recognizing that there were things out of scope that in due course we'd have to address.
That's great. Can I ask, Mark, what areas does the freelance community charter cover? And also, I guess, where are the gaps?
Well, you mentioned, Romana, at the very beginning, the importance of the life cycle. And this is how I certainly first started thinking about it. From the very first time that somebody walks into the Royal Opera House, or from before that, when we were in the recruitment process, how do we recruit? How do people get onto our list, as it were? Is it fair? Is it transparent? So there's something right from the very beginning before people have even been recruited to come and work here. Then they arrive in this very large, complicated building. It's 7 floors. It's easy to get lost. And there's something simply about making people feel welcome and valued, and to be able to find their way to places. Where are the loos? Where's the canteen? What time's the canteen open? You know, all of these sorts of things. Very simple, basic things that make people either do feel or don't feel comfortable in the place that they're coming to work. And then, of course, there are things about career progression. Can we support people to progress their careers, even though they might not be working with us on a permanent basis? And then right through to the end, when people finish, a lot of people will work on a particular project. That project will come to an end, and then they go on to something else. But can we keep in touch with them? Is there a way in which we can, at the end of a project, have a wrap up to understand what worked well, what didn't work well, what we could do better next time? So we try to think about it in that life cycle way that you talked about, Romana, from the very beginning, before people are recruited, right through to the end when they move on to do something else.
And what have you learned as part of your journey of creating the charter? And have you had any feedback so far?
Yeah, we have. So I think we've learned a lot of things, but I'll pull out 2 in particular, because these things I think are illustrative and in a way illustrate the importance of involving freelancers themselves. One of the things that came up as being very important, which completely surprised me, and I would never have thought of had I just sat in the room and drafting this on my own, was for a lot of, if you work at the Opera House, you have a different coloured lanyard, depending on whether you're a permanent employee or you're a freelancer. It would never have occurred to me for a moment that mattered, the colour of your lanyard. For a lot of people, it did, not because they were particularly bothered about the colour scheme, but because they felt that by having different colour schemes, it kind of illustrated a difference, as it were, between the freelance community and the others, in a way that sort of suggested that the freelance community was somehow lesser. We're having to look at that. There are some reasons why we have differences of lanyard for security and other reasons, but I suspect that there are things we can do about that. But the important reason that I mentioned that, even though it sounds quite parochial, is I simply would not have thought of it if we hadn't involved freelancers from the very beginning. So that's one thing. The second thing that's particularly struck me is the extent to which we are already seeing some behavioural changes in the Royal Opera House. Not things which are mandated, but simply by the fact that we've been talking about this matter, it's changed some people's behaviour. I'm hearing anecdotally that people are being paid more promptly, for example, because the people in the pay department have just, it's sort of, the pennies dropped, as it were. So those two things, behavioural change, not mandated, simply the fact that we're talking about it, changing people's behaviour, and the importance of involving freelancers, because that's the way you learn about what matters rather than just assuming that you know what matters.
I think also, I remember when we had a chat, there were changes in relation to that point of contact that we were talking about. So for someone to have a key point of contact, and how you initially thought that could work and then had to change.
Absolutely. So initially, I thought that it would make sense to have a sort of centralized structure, probably based in HR, where people would go if they had a query about all sorts of things. It became very apparent that that wasn't the best way of going about it, because, of course, there are very different departments in this organisation. If you're working in the wig and hair and makeup, it's very different to if you're working in the engineering department. And the central place isn't always the best place to go. It's probably easier, better, and more appropriate for people to be able to talk to someone that's a bit closer to home, as it were. And so we've decentralized, and again, that's something that we learned from the process. And so everybody now who starts, who comes in a freelancer, knows or should know who their point of contact is, and that point of contact should be someone who's close to them, both physically and in terms of what they do.
Yeah, so very much a learning point. And in terms of the charter, what are your plans with it? How do you see this progressing?
Absolutely.
It's very much a statement of intent at the moment, but I understand that you have an action plan.
For anybody who's seen it, you'll see that it's reasonably high level, as was always the intention, and it sets out a bunch of principles. And I think those principles are very important, and it's a step in the right direction. But we were always very conscious from the very beginning that a set of principles, unless implemented, are pretty worthless. And so alongside the published charter, we have a kind of a more working internal document, which is an action plan, which I lead, which our chief executive has made very clear at our executive team meetings that he expects the senior people in the different departments to drive forward. And I report regularly to our executive team on progress. So, we're all aware, we're all bought into, I think, at a senior level, to turning the principles into practice. I said before that we have due humility about this. The scope doesn't cover everything we'd like to cover. We won't be able to do everything that we want to do as quickly as we want to do it. But what we are committed to doing is as much as we can, as quickly as we can, in the best way we possibly can. And a key part of that is to make sure that we close the loop. So we've made a commitment to at least annually, I think we'll do it more often, but at least annually, to have a review of progress. Is the charter itself still right? And how are we doing against implementation of it? Bringing back into the room, physically into the room, and once again paying them, those same freelancers who were involved at the very beginning. Because I think it's very, I mean, of course, some people will change, some people will come, some people will go, but I think it's quite important to keep some continuity there where we can, so that people can say, we set out on this journey together. We were trying to understand what we were trying to achieve. To what extent have we achieved it? Are we achieving it? What do we need to change? What do we need to adapt? And we will have to change and adapt. But I think that that's going to be an ongoing, and that's an ongoing commitment. That's not just one year. We'll do it every year. And I think it's very important that that's built into the process, if you like.
Thank you. And for people watching today, we have a variety of organisations who may be on varying journeys with this. I mean, in terms of your advice in how to begin or where to begin, what would you say?
Yeah, well, a couple of things I suppose I'd say about that. One is that we were conscious at the Royal Opera House that we weren't the only organisation thinking about these things. So we've been talking to other organisations, peer organisations like the RSC, National Theatre, Glyndebourne and others. Each of us kind of doing our own thing because we're all slightly different, but sharing as we go. What's working, what's not working, what can we learn from each other and so on. So I think talking to other organisations is absolutely critical because you can share. As I said, I don't propose to have all the answers, not by any means. I'm happy to share what I know, and I hope very much that other people will share with me what they know. Between us, we grow together. Absolutely. I think the other thing is it can be a bit intimidating, and it was a little bit intimidating at the beginning to think, where shall I start? And I said to you, Romana, the other day, I think in a way, not that I've ever tried to write a novel, or not one I'd admit to anyway, but in a way, I imagine it's a bit like writing a novel. You know, you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you and it's all a bit scary. And the only way to start is to start. And that's what we did. We said, well, we're just going to start. It's not going to be perfect. And we were honest about that up front. And as I said to somebody else earlier, I think people are very forgiving of you if you're honest and you show good intent and you just start. Start writing something down. It won't be perfect. Talk to people, involve the right people, and that's the way to get going. And once you get going, it becomes easier. I suppose the wheels start to turn, and you feel as if you're getting somewhere, and that gives you some inspiration to continue.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's really interesting to hear about the Royal Opera House's transparent commitment to freelancers, but also an approach that looks at the whole journey of the freelancer, from recruitment right through to the end of a project or engagement, and then beyond. This life cycle of communication. You've got your charter on the website, so that makes it accessible to everybody. That helps in terms of attracting talent, hiring practice. I think you mentioned that you're looking into training your hiring managers in relation to that. Data to try and drive change in terms of diversity questionnaires, this welcome pack at the induction stage that you have in development, with guidance and advice about what support is available, and working practices, knowing what to expect when working at the ROH, as well as having that key contact that people can go to, and then right through to the aftercare at the end of a project or engagement. So it's a very holistic way of thinking about your freelancer engagements. Thank you again. We really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
When we speak to performing arts organisations, we often hear that they have some supportive practices in place, and yet there's little uptake or sometimes even a disconnect from their freelance workforce. Could it be that many freelancers just don't know the ethos of a company or the support structures that might already be in place, such as an openness to flexible working? Or is it that freelancers are often in this very precarious position and they're afraid and they fear that if they raise challenges, for example, my childcare has fallen through, or they ask if something is even available, such as flexible working, they might be considered as less employable or just too troublesome to be considered for other roles in the future. And I think this is why, by openly communicating your company ethos or showing what support strategies are in place, that's key, because it enables freelancers to raise potential challenges before they might arise, but it also gives people the confidence to know how to proceed if something crops up. More importantly, it gives you as an organisation the ability to be proactive rather than reactive, and then you can come up with these strategies to address any needs. And a lot of that, as we've seen, comes down to advanced communication. And on that point, I'd very much like to invite Katherine Senior from Tilted Wig Theatre Company to talk briefly about the welcome pack that they are sending out to freelancers that they engage for their shows at the beginning of a project. And Katherine, you're in tour at the moment, aren't you? Would you mind giving us a short introduction of Tilted Wig?
Yeah.
And introducing yourself?
I'm Katherine. I'm a woman in her early 40s. I've got blonde hair, mid-length hair. I've got a blue denim jacket on, and yeah, I'm excited to, and a little nervous as well to talk about this. But yes, yeah. So myself and my partner, we've been touring the whole of the UK for about 17 years now. We've got a tour out at the moment, and we're a commercial touring company in the sense that we rely on box office to fund our shows. And so our shows have a fairly high sort of production value, and we tour to mid-scale and #1 venues, but behind the scenes, we're quite a small outfit. It's just myself and Matthew, and which we hope, we sort of have that sort of, we're quite a personable outfit because we're quite small, I'd hope. But everyone we work with is freelance. So everyone that we pull together for a show, they're all freelance. We're parents to 3 young boys under 6 as well. So finding support and flexible ways of working for people with caring responsibilities and access needs of any kind, it's not only at the front of our minds, but it's what forms each company we build, because that's the root of us. You know, we're at the sort of heart of it. We recently joined PiPA really to help us build on what we've learned over the years that we've been touring, but also to find new ways of working and take our ethos, for want of a better word, to which can sometimes sort of get, you know, can sort of get lodged in your head, but actually put it down onto paper so that it's clear from the starting blocks. We've always been very aware to make sure that we plan our auditions well in advance, you know, so that everyone knows, you know, right from the start. So if you do have difficulty finding childcare, or if you need to find childcare, then it's possible, you know right from the start that you could even go for a job that we were offering.
And Katherine, you've recently developed this new welcome pack. It'd be really good to know what it contains.
Yeah, okay, so our welcome pack. So it contains, there's a health and well-being guide in there. This was a little up for debate as to whether we sent this out, I have to say, because I had reservations as to whether it was too personal a document to ask people to fill out. But in the end, we made it clear in the covering email that you only to fill it out should you wish us to be aware of anything that may help you do your job to your best ability, but you absolutely do not have to share this information if you don't want to. I suppose it's having the choice, and we always want people that work with us feel they have the freedom to express any concerns at any point in the process. So that was one document. The second part of the welcome pack was an access rider, which we helped sort of develop with PiPA, which again company members can fill out should they wish to relay any needs they have. You know, our goal is to create a space where everyone can thrive and contribute their talents, regardless of any access challenges they may face, and where everyone feels safe and supported and valued.
There's also I think you were saying that you've got like a statement of intent as well,
Yeah.
that you've put together, and that covers several areas. Can you tell us what those areas are?
Yeah, so the Tilted Wig statement was initially called a policy, which sounds horribly sort of corporate. So that was great having PiPA on board just to, you know, change the wording like that. So it's basically, it's a written version of what we would normally say to people face to face. But of course, you can't get all that info into an audition and meeting and rehearsal room. So again, having you guys to frame that into a document was great. And then so, you know, people can take time to read over it and come back to us. It's that included things like, well, our ethos and our sorry,
very practical things as well in terms of medical appointments and
yeah, any access needs you would have, any you know, childcare, anything like that you have to have in there. And
I can see that there's a children in workplace section as well, which is really important. And there was, I think, plans for aftercare. So very like the Royal Opera House, you're doing a life cycle. So you're starting right from the very beginning and you're taking it all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
In terms of getting feedback from your freelancers. Yeah,
and I think it's not something that's set. It's you know, like Mark was saying, it's not set in stone. You know, so you know the whole welcome pack. You know, to gather feedback each time so we can sort of continuously improve our offerings, and that's all they are, they're offerings. So we're constantly learning, you know, the areas that we can improve on. And, you know, I'm sure we make mistakes. You know, I know we make mistakes, but our intentions are genuine. So
and do you think that welcome pack has contributed to you know, maintaining and having quite a diverse range of freelance talent?
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. And especially, yeah, with the tour, I mean, it's been vital on this tour to have the access rider. because although it helps people with, you know, carrying responsibilities, and it's much broader than that. We're looking to be accessible on many levels, and with our current tour, it was paramount that we opened up the conversation, because we have a cast member who has not only not toured before, which is a whole new sort of realm, you know, if you're a young actor, but also they have very specific access needs that we had to make sure that we could meet. So the conversation began right from the first meetings. It's been brilliant to be able to accommodate her needs, you know, and what an asset to the show she is. It's one of the most exciting companies we've brought together, and it's just a tiny shift. It's just a conversation. And I think sometimes, yes, it's often the case, and we find it, that the financial constraints take away some of your choices. You think, well, I cannot afford, we do not have the money to accommodate that, but often it's just about clever planning and being prepared to perhaps do things just a little bit differently. And the scheduling on this show is the best we've ever done. We knew right from the word go that we had to accommodate certain needs. So our director, and it's often down to the director because they create the schedules, it created a watertight schedule, and people were only called when they were needed, even during Tech Week. Amazing. No one sat around in the dark when they didn't need to be. And so planning is, yeah.
And has this all helped with your advanced planning, so that you've had more time to be able to get those things in place?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think I think especially sort of in theatre, you're sort of expected to just sort of be on call, and it doesn't you don't, and also there's that sense of, you know, feeling like you've got to, if we're not working, you know, especially in Tech Week, you know, if we're not doing those 50 hours a week, then, you know, and we're not all burnt out, and that we're not going to get to where we need to be. It's not going to be the production quality, will not, you know, but sometimes you just need to sort of step away and maybe go and see the family, and then
yeah, so it seems like it's beneficial for everybody, really. And thank you so much for sharing all that. I think it's really, really important to see what smaller scale organizations are doing to communicate those positive practices that you've got in place, so that freelancers know what to expect, what they can do, who they can go to when challenges arise from the beginning. So, you know, what you're demonstrating there is that really simple first step to communicate what you've already got in place. You were doing it verbally, now it's written, so that, you know, that's another easier way to communicate. And you're putting forward your intentions in writing. It's, I guess, what you would say is an easy win that lets you start off on that right foot. And as you said, with your person who had access needs, it helps you to identify gaps that you might have as an organization as well. And so, again, a very proactive, not reactive thing to do. And as Mark said before, and you're saying also, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to start somewhere and do something, and that you've really demonstrated that. Thank you so much. And you're in the middle of touring, so really grateful for your time today, and I hope that all goes well. So thank you, Katherine. And let's us take a little deeper into some key areas that organizations can look into to strengthen their practices. PiPA has a toolkit and resources, and I think Katherine mentioned the access riders, so we'll come to that later. But we have a toolkit and resources for all our charter partners to access, and we'll share direct links to some of those today after the webinar with the charter partners who are present here today. So to summarize, one of those key areas that we've seen is advanced communication. So you might already be doing great things, but you need to communicate your best practices to your parent and carer freelancers right from the recruitment stage, from adverts. And you've seen the Royal Opera House example. They have this statement of intent to freelancers on their website. That's accessible to everyone. We also encourage all our partners who take part in our programs to include a family-friendly working statement to freelance and permanent staff on their website, and also on any recruitment materials. To give as much information as possible in advance, we've just seen with Tilted Wig that they've been working towards this. but especially about those inclusive recruitment practices, what to expect during interviews or auditions, what to expect when working for you. And as part of the welcome pack examples in our charter program toolkit, we've also just developed a new resource in conjunction with one of our charter partners. It's an introductory email template that you can send out, and it communicates from the outset your inclusive, family-friendly policies and your ethos to freelancers so that your freelance workforce know what to expect. It's also a really easy way to open up a dialogue, so that you don't have those questions as to, should I say something? Should the freelancer say something? It's a dialogue. It opens up a dialogue between you both. And again, proactive. It's encouraging conversations about caring responsibilities, giving you some foresight of things that might come up during a period of engagement. The other thing you can do that's another easy win is add something to your email signature. That can showcase your intentions, but it's also a really good way of role modeling your family-friendly company ethos. So, for example, some of my colleagues at PiPA, including the CEOs, show the company ethos from the top down. So I've got an out-of-office message. They have out-of-office messages saying that sometimes I might be working odd hours in order to manage my own work-life balance and caring responsibilities. You might receive emails from me out of normal working hours. I don't expect you to reply until you're next working. And that's a very easy win. Anna, can I hand over to you, please, for our next key area?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Romana, and also thank you, Katherine and Mark. I think it's also really good to look at the infrastructure of support strategies that your organization already has in place or could have in place, and how this is effectively communicated to your freelance workforce so that they can access it. As we heard in the earlier examples from Katherine and also from Mark, it is important to identify those key point of contacts for your freelancers. So you provide them with a clear route of how and where to raise any questions or issues. Most of our program partners, for example, have a PiPA champion in place, which more than often is someone who advises on the company's existing family-friendly policies and the practices and the procedures that they have. And we heard this already, Katherine mentioned that if you haven't already, it is really beneficial to introduce an access rider to ensure that any access needs of your workforce are met so that they can therefore bring their best self to work. An access rider enables a freelancer or employee to communicate their specific access requirements, as well as actually equipping the employer with a better understanding of potential support strategies that they can put in place. At PiPA, we quite often actually hear from organizations as well as individuals that they are unsure of when or how to inquire around caring-related needs, which is why we developed the Caring Inclusive Rider, which was created in consultation with freelancers and some of our partner organizations, Birds of Paradise and Grey Eye. And this Caring Inclusive Access Rider empowers everyone, including freelancers, to talk about any aspect of their identity that they may wish to raise with the company or that they feel is important to take into account when developing the work structures. And if it is completed before or during the induction, then any access needs could be addressed in advance instead of on the fly as a reaction when a challenge might occur. And being proactive and prepare is what then in turn will strengthen your business resilience. We will share the Caring Inclusive Access Rider with anybody who is here today, so that if you want to, obviously everybody can use it. Back to you, Romana.
Thank you. I think data collection and monitoring is a really big key area, and that's going to go towards your business resilience and retention. Equality and diversity monitoring forms should also include caring responsibilities, and our charter partners have access to example forms that you can use, not only because this sends a really clear message that you are considering caring commitments right from the outset, but it's also going to help you as an organization start to understand the makeup of your workforce and recognize the needs that individuals might have. It also shows, and something for you to investigate, is who is not applying to your organization and who is not working for you. Data drives change, and that helps with inclusion and accessibility. And it's also going to inform your organization's strategy going forward. That's really important. Anna, can you tell us briefly, please, about working practices?
Yes, of course. Your working practices are, of course, key for attracting and retraining your freelancers, especially when it comes to the offer of flexible working. This can obviously take many different forms, from earlier start or finish time, truncated weeks, job share. Just think outside of the box. We don't have time to go into detail here today, but if you need support around flexible working, PiPA has many toolkit resources, from how to guide sample policy, industry case studies, to hopefully help inspire and then embed new practices with any size organization. So the key is identifying where the flex might be in roles and then communicating this from the start, ideally at recruitment, because freelancers are highly unlikely to ask what flexibility might be available. Excuse me. So make the point to prevent them from self-selecting out. And maybe also consider offering training to your staff or managers in relation to inclusive recruitment and flexible working. Because when we work with organization, we often find that some departments are better equipped than others. So supporting your managers to embed these practices in all departments is actually crucial. And lastly, let me just come to scheduling. Katherine touched upon this already by telling us, giving as much scheduling information as possible, such as for auditions and rehearsal times, because last-minute calls and changes to schedules make it incredibly difficult for anyone, especially freelancers with caring responsibilities, to engage effectively. It puts a lot of stress on the individual to then arrange or to rearrange alternative care, which, if it's even available, can become very costly. But finally, Romana, over to you to close the loop.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite fitting, isn't it? Closing the loop. I think it takes us back to the life cycle, that life cycle starting with adverts, recruitment, etc., and going right the way through to the end of a project or engagement. It's important to ask for feedback. What did we do well? And if you've done something well, it's really good to celebrate that. You can make that public. Also share it with other organizations, share it with us at PiPA, because we can all benefit, as well as your freelance workforce. Also, asking how can we improve is a key part of retention. And as we can see, both with Tilted Wig and the Royal Opera House, it is a journey that will continue and change. And so that will also help with your business resilience and your retention. Also, as Mark said, think of how you might want to keep in touch in relation to future projects and engagements. That's also very important. And back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Romana. I think it's really important to reflect and learn from previous experience, because that's how you build your knowledge and your understanding, and can actually grow in all the different areas. I really hope that the areas that we touched upon here today will give everyone here some inspiration, as well as maybe ideas for first actions. Both Katherine and Mark have told us how important it is to actually just find a point to start, knowing that it might not be perfect, because it will help you then to improve your practices and thereby engage more effectively with your freelance workforce. And as we said, we will share the slides, the recording, of course, of today, and our Caring Inclusive Access Rider. And also for the charter partners who are watching here today, we will include some direct links of some of the toolkit resources that we mentioned here today. But as always, if you've got any questions about any of the areas that we covered, just get in touch with us, I would say. We have a little bit of time. I'm just trying to look through the chat. I don't think I've seen anything in the Q&A directly. I think the only question that I managed to pick up throughout was about the difficulties of actually getting data from your freelance workforce, and I think that's something that most organizations have come across as a challenge. Just stop my screen briefly. There we go. And I'm sure Katherine and Mark, you are also, trying to collect data from your freelancers as well as your wider workforce, but find it tricky to actually get all the data that you want, or in the amounts that you would ideally like. Have you got any suggestions around this, Mark?
Yeah, so as you say, it is a challenge, and it's a challenge for very good reason, which is that people, it seems to me, are frequently asked the same questions again and again, especially if they move from one place to another quite frequently. It's not always clear why the question is being asked and all the rest of it. So I think, there's no simple solution to this, but I think what we need to try to do, and what we are trying to do, are two things. First of all, we're trying to streamline the way in which we collect this data. So, for example, if someone comes and works with us for a bit and then they go work somewhere else and then they come back, we don't necessarily need to ask them the same questions all over again. Let's get a bit smarter about that. And at the very least, explain why we're asking the question, what we're going to do with the data. Because one of the things that makes people concerned, of course, is they're worried that their data won't be held securely, or they'll give an answer which might disadvantage them in some way. So I don't have a simple solution to it, but I think recognizing that there's a challenge, I'm not simply thinking, as I'm afraid some people do, that freelancers are somehow just not sort of being willing to cooperate, but recognizing that they have genuine concerns and challenges and legitimate ones, and working with them, as I've said from the very beginning, to try to overcome them. What are the barriers? What are the solutions? What are the issues that stop them from doing so? And what do they think some of the solutions are? And that's what we're sort of edging our way towards.
Yeah, thank you. Katherine, was there anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I think, we're obviously much smaller, so it's easier to, and I think in the past we've perhaps just done it just verbally, spoken to people, but we're wanting now, now that we are documenting more and more, that certainly after this tour, and we will go by a tour basis, because each tour is a new company. So that's as much as twice a year that we would gather feedback. At least twice a year we'd gather feedback, and if that's if people want to give it as well.
Absolutely, I think it's something. The more information you can give of why this data is collected and how it actually informs better practices for yourself, for your organization, and as you said, Mark, how it's actually used securely, so that it's not being used at that moment of recruitment where you go, oh, okay, we can match candidates with, for example, their monitoring forms. All of these things needs to be secure enough to actually give that information, but also have the time to fill it out. I think that's really important, because it is on personal time. I'm just looking at the time. It is getting quite close. I just saw one question that I just want to briefly answer. It was about the fees of becoming a PiPA partner. So our program starts at £500 per year. It includes one-to-one calls. There was the question: does it have one-to-one calls? Yes. So you get access to our relationship managers, and obviously access to the toolkit, as well as the wider network. So Tilted Wig, the Royal Opera House, and many other organizations, I've seen some in the chat here today, are in a big network. So when there is a question going, does anybody else know about this? Or has anybody got a sample policy around a certain area? Or could you put me in touch with an organization who's done a job share for, I don't know, a lighting technician? We help to then facilitate that, and also offer seminars where our partners can talk to each other around a certain theme that enables them to basically learn from each other, because this cross-organizational learning is really key. It's a sliding scale, so £500, and then it goes upwards, but we can send all these information out. We'll make a note of that when we send materials from this webinar today. I just want to say thank you, Katherine and Mark, for today, and also Romana for holding the space so beautifully, for giving us this time and sharing so much insights of where you are in your journey. I think that's really important and very useful for organizations to hear from different of different sizes and of different remits. You know, touring and building based can be very, very different. And just before we go, I'd like to remind basically everyone here today that our Balancing Act survey is open till the end of October. Please fill it out and share it with all of your colleagues and your wider Performing Arts network. We will pop the link again in the chat, because we want to hear from everyone, employees, freelancers, or even those who are currently not in work, with or without carrying responsibilities, to help us learn more about the experiences of people working in theatre, dance, opera, or music. I hope you've seen that our work is underpinned by data, and by completing and sharing this industry data, industry survey, you can help us to make this invisible more visible, and to bring about change to make our industry stronger and more resilient in times like these where we really need it. But I think that's really it for today. So thank you, everyone. If you've got any questions, do send us an email. But thank you very much for attending. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you, Katherine, Mark, and Romana, and everyone from the PiPA team who's been supporting. And we hope to see you very soon in some form or other. Take care. Bye-bye.